A reading from John. Jesus took the wine and said, "It is finished." Then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. It is finished. 3 simple words. What do they mean? What is the it that is finished? And finished what? For Jesus, at least, it's clear he has reached the end of his time in the mortal body that has housed him for 30 some odd years. And for the last 3 years, he has been mocked and ridiculed, derided and scorned. And now here at the end of his life, he has walked from the Garden of Gethsemane to Golgotha, and along the way, he's been burdened and broken, poked and prodded. And now that the time has come for him to die, he says simply, "It is finished." It seems so straightforward, so final. There are no hidden messages in these words, no parables to decipher. These 3 words form a statement that anyone can take at face value and know what it means. And the words come at the end of a life that has been in equal parts mundane and miraculous. Jesus has healed and has even walked on water. He has loved and shown us how to love. And he shared his very last meal even while knowing what lay ahead. And now that he's here on the cross, having been given sour wine to drink and his garments stripped, a crown of thorns placed on his head, every last piece of his dignity has been taken away. And in this moment, it is finished. And yet, as I think through this scene, as I think through what this moment looks like, while my mind is on Jesus as he hangs on the cross, I can't help but wonder about the others. I can't help but wonder about those gathered around, watching and waiting to see what will happen. What of the disciples and the followers, the men and women who've been seeking an answer and hanging on every one of his words? What of his mother, who must stand by watching helplessly as the life bleeds from her son? And what of the crowd, who, after having been whipped into a frenzy, isn't quite sure what to do any longer? They came for the spectacle. They came for the drama. They came because they were swept into a moment. At this point, I wonder if some of them may even regret the choice that had been made to put this man on a cross. Maybe some of them wish that they could take back the decision that they had vocally endorsed and ratified. They are a critical part of this moment as they stand as witnesses to Jesus' last words. It is finished. Sometimes we too are called to be witnesses when a life comes to an end. Not quite a year ago, we all stood transfixed to our televisions and phones and computer screens, watching for 8 minutes and 43 seconds as the life seeped out of George Floyd. We watched as he cried out for air, for his mother, for mercy, as he breathed his last. It seemed so shocking, beyond the pale. But was it really? After all, we've been witnesses to death before. In 2014, we saw the video of Eric Garner as he was choked to death, asphyxiated for selling cigarettes individually instead of from a pack. And here in our very own city, we watched as Rayshard Brooks, who had fallen asleep in the drive-thru lane at Wendy's, was shot in the back on video and later died. I could go on. Or maybe I should talk about how we continue to endorse a government that conducts modern-day crucifixions. We call them executions now, regardless of the fact that we know statistically some of those who were put to death are innocent, or that all such convictions are a result of a justice system that is steeped in caste and systemic racism, and yes, also white supremacy. For each of these God's children and countless others, it was finished, just like the life of Jesus came to an end. And we stand in the crowd and watch for a time until life calls us back. The demands of the day, the meal we've left on the stove, the client who needs to be called back, something else as we keep scrolling on Facebook. Whatever it is, we invariably wander away from the moment and we move on. For a while last summer, we paid attention. Pandemic notwithstanding, we marched, we cried, we held vigils, we prayed, we bought out all the books on Amazon, we talked, we wondered, we admitted our own failings, or maybe we didn't, but we probably still thought about them. In some way, whether passively or actively, we were all witnesses to a crucifixion. Whether we were horrified or accepting, we were the witnesses for those who lost their lives. It is finished. It sounds so final. There's a period at the end of that sentence for a reason. At least for Jesus there is, because in that moment only death awaits. But for the rest of us? For all of us who are made witnesses and co-conspirators in our societal sin? For each of us as we decide each day to take steps towards or away from reconciliation with God and with each other. That same sentence doesn't end with a period, but with a comma. It is finished, and now it is up to us who are left behind to pick up the pieces, to figure out how to move on, to decide how we right the wrongs and how we treat each other, and whether we are at all capable of being the beloved community that we say we are. This is what happens as the seconds pass by after the finishing and as we move towards what comes next. Just like the crowd who heard these 3 words spoken by Jesus, it is finished. Or the 3 words spoken by Eric Garner, "I can't breathe." Or George Floyd as he cried out, calling for his dead mother. I can just imagine what the scene was like at the time of the crucifixion. Back then, as it was finished, people began to wander away. The crowd dispersed, thinking of their next meal or how their feet hurt because they had to stand for so long, or maybe they had animals that needed tending. The centurions returned to their barracks, their services no longer needed. Simon of Cyrene, who had unexpectedly been pulled into this drama, was now free to go on his way. And then there was Mary, a mother who was left wondering how it was that her child had left this earth before her. And the disciples and followers of Jesus, the men and women who had stood with him until the end, as well as those who hadn't, those who'd loved him deeply and truly, with every fiber of their being, and in that moment felt lost and abandoned and confused and unsure. For all of them, each of whom was touched in some way, whether large or small, by a life that had come to an end. It is finished. Those last words meant everything to Jesus and also to those watching, but perhaps not in the same way. Today, we are the crowd. We are the ones who turn off the TV once we've had enough, or we look away when we're no longer able to stand it. We are the ones who choose to engage in respectability politics and carefully thread needles designed to push the system only but so fast and each other only but so hard. We are the ones who bought the book that now sits dusty on our bedside table. We'll get to it eventually. Or maybe we've even read it, but we just don't know what to do with what we've learned, because continuing to feel helpless is easier than actually digging in. Because at the end of the day, being part of the crowd means that we were there, that we were a witness to something deeply unpleasant. And let's face it, it's easier to keep moving than to admit what that does to our souls. What do we do with our witness? What do we do with what we have seen or been a party to or have allowed to happen? That's the question. Do we let it change our lives or do we ignore it? Do we have a reckoning about what it means, our own part in the grand design? Or do we just go back to business as usual, knowing that our own inaction means that we'll be called to stand in the crowd and witness again and again and again, knowing each time that in that moment, for someone, while it is truly finished, for us, in all the ways that really count, our work has only just begun.